I've got Shaykh Hassan Rabbani, who's a chaplain with the Heritage, and mashallah, he's also a counselor for Scottish Relate. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Obviously, I've not really done you any justice here. So tell us more about what kind of work are you involved in?
Yeah, I mean, my work these days, a lot of it is really outside the mosque, I guess. So at the university, there's a lot of work with students that I do, and there's also a dimension of outreach. So I talk to schools, particularly in Edinburgh, private schools, where they have Muslim chaplaincy set up. How are they dealing with their Muslim students, dealing with other universities, organizations, academics, going on academic conferences. So that's part of that. And then the counselling side is interesting. I work for Relationship Scotland, which is Relate, which allows me to work with white clients, but also I do a lot of counselling with Muslim
So
clients.
how is that? I mean,
With white clients?
non-Muslim clients, you're someone who's a scholar, a sheikh. Do you get any kind of reaction?
It's interesting. I mean, it's a very formal place where they come into, but when they do see me, there is certain reactions that they get. And, I deal with very colourful kind of cases. But
Colourful and challenging.
Yeah, colourful, challenging, very challenging, in fact. Maybe in another show I can share some of these challenging cases, but also challenges me personally. So I have my own supervisor that I deal with some of these cases, alhamdulillah. But the skills are transferable, so it means that I do a lot of community work, and people a lot who have issues normally ring me up. I mean, one I'm dealing with is a Muslim girl who met a revert in university. She wants to get married, but she comes from a very traditional kind of family. So I'm dealing with the mother, I'm dealing with her. There's a lot of issues actually prior to her meeting this young chap that I'm dealing with. So the soft skills of the counselling allows me to deploy them in kind of other scenarios.
Fantastic. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I'm doing these podcasts, which are called Amjid Talks. And we're going to cover a number of different issues, issues around relationship, issues that affect everyday people. So that's the focus of these podcasts. And we're in the month of Ramadan, and we're going to be talking about Ramadan. This is our second show. We're now coming to the last 10 days of Ramadan. People have been fasting for the 20 days, some maybe 19, some 20, depending on when you started it. But Sheikh, how do we utilize these remaining 10 days, and what's the importance of these 10 days?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's an important question. I think in the middle 10 days, we get really flattened. Our old habits begin to kick in. You'll realize that yourself, but everyone who's kind of listening and watching, the music track that you fervently kind of stop listening to now kind of creeps up into our YouTube playlist. We're just struggling with sleep, and just the grind of it really is. The middle 10 days are actually very challenging from what I've picked up on people. So alhamdulillah, I don't think so. We need a lot of motivation, because it's always been put into us that the last 10 days are of Laylatul Qadr. So almost lifts us up. But also I know Eid is around the corner, so you think, chalo, last 10 days, we can do that. But I think also we realize how fast Ramadan has gone. And I think before Laylatul Qadr steps in, we think, oh my God, it just started yesterday. It's 20 days gone. I haven't done anything. I haven't finished the Quran yet. I'm still struggling with my namaz. I'm still missing my fajr, I'm missing my series. So all of that, you're panicking. And this is when I would say that is important. You haven't lost Ramadan yet. In fact, the important 10 days are coming. So if the first 20 days, if they've been Taraweeh and Taraweeh, you can still make most of it in these last 10 days.
And do you think that people do ramp it up in the last 10 days? I mean, I've called this show the finishing line. The finishing line being obviously the end of Ramadan, the end of the 10 days, Eid. I mean, do you think generally as a community, we will step it up, notch it up into a different gear just for those remaining days?
I think the mosque is a good indicator. So if you see the mosques in the first week of Ramadan, they're busy. And then there's a huge dip. You'd see that. I mean, you go on YouTube, and a lot of these mosques are live streaming their Quran and Taraweeh, and you see that just a few rows. But I think the last 10 days, I think that really picks up again. So, and I think because of that, if the community is picking up, you yourself, it will pick you up. And that's a beautiful part of being in a Muslim community. And I know we're in a non-Muslim country, so it's a bit difficult. But generally, when the community is picking up, you're almost kind of feeling left out. And I think it's a societal effect. I remember, the cost of living crisis happened and people start cancelling their Netflix accounts. Even if you were doing well, you're still questioning, well, why do I have a Netflix if everyone's cancelling?
Yeah.
So it does have that societal impact. Like if everyone's doing it, wait a minute, am I missing something? And I think with the last 10 days, mosques picking up, people going to Umrah, so you're feeling a bit spiritually low. People are doing stuff. What can I actually do to reach out? And so I think there's a really lift in the community.
So let's talk about the last 10 days. Why are they special? What separates them from the other 20 days? From an Islamic perspective.
Islamic point, if I go to just before going to the religious part, my earliest memories of Ramadan with my nanny, I remember growing up, and our elders were very careful on how to prepare for Ramadan. The TV would, those days we only had TV. There was no,
you wouldn't watch TV at all?
The TV, no, she would put it into the storeroom. It was kind of locked. There was no TV. And then,
that's how drastic it would have. Should it be physically moved and locked?
Yeah, physically moved, very drastic. And the last 10 days, majority, my nanny and some of the other ladies, they would say Itikaaf in the house. And they were so adamant you couldn't speak to them, nothing, and talk. So you felt so isolated that you almost were forced to, do stuff in Ramadan, spiritual stuff. But I think now the distraction is so intense that it's very difficult. And I think this is where religious literature may help. The Laylatul Qadr, for us, if you look at the Quran only has a few surahs that are named after important events. So Surah Al-Jum'ah, an entire surah talks about Al-Jum'ah, and this is why Jum'ah is very important for us. People Friday. Who don't need 5 namaz, still Jum'ah, they're still there. Laylatul Qadr is like that. There's an entire chapter on Laylatul. The verses about Ramadan are sporadic. There's Surah Al-Baqarah and here and there. But Laylatul Qadr has a whole chapter dedicated to that. And I think that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really telling us that, okay, Ramadan's important, but guys, the nights of Laylatul Qadr are very, very important. And I'm going to re-emphasize that by giving you this, beautiful chapter.
So Laylatul Qadr, and we're going to talk about it in a separate podcast.
Yeah, of course.
We'll save it for that. But just the generics, it's the night of power. It's where ibadah or worship in that night is equivalent to worship for 1,000 months.
Yes.
And I think it works out
more, 83 years.
Yeah, 83 years and 4 months. But I think that's just an indication. It could be far greater than that.
Of course. And it falls in the last 10 days. And as we are moving into last 10 days, I think we get often sidetracked. We've got Eid coming up, so Eid shopping, haircuts, all of that. And I say to people, maybe squeeze that in the middle 10. So at least the last 10, you're slightly more concentrated.
But by that time, Sheikh, your hair's a mess.
Yeah. No, is it after 10 days?
But yeah, so obviously the night of power, going back to that, it's what's the sacred text? What does it say in terms of when is that night?
Yeah,
there seems to be a lot more kind of focus on particular nights, the 27th, the odd nights. But I
think the particular nights that people focus on, a lot of them go back to certain sayings of Sahaba and scholars, their own spiritual experiences where in a particular year they found the night to be on that. But I think for normal Muslims, we don't have those spiritual experiences as such. So for us, it's important to seek it out in those odd 21st, 3rd, 5th, 7th and 9th. But I think it's more important to seek it out on the all 10 nights, right, simply because there's a split.
Yeah.
Of people starting one day and another. So almost the last 10 nights should be really treated, honestly, if you think about it. The whole last Ashara should be of Laylatul Qadr.
Exactly.
And I think it'd be easier for us. So my advice would be is that the mosques that are doing Ramadan on one particular, so 21st, 3rd and 7th, you would go in those mosques. But then the mosques that started a day later, on those days, you would go to those mosques.
And there's some narrations that talk about it could be any time within those 10 days. So,
Absolutely.
so by covering all or treating all 10 days, you're covering your bases basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, Ramadan
what should you be doing on these nights?
I personally don't emphasize too much because I think there's a intensity of the 21st starts and then there's a burnout. I think there has to be a balance. You know, a bit like Ramadan starting, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and by the end of it, you haven't done anything. So I think you have to be very realistic in your goals. I think something like make sure you read your 5-time namaz on that particular day with the sunnahs and nawafil, that you're very conscious that you're not sinning. And that's very important, actually, staying away from the kaba'ir sins. That's very important.
Kaba'ir, if you can elaborate.
So the kind of the major sins that in which the hadith talks about, so fornication, stealing, ghiba, swearing, those things that carry a kind of strong punishment actually of it.
So Shaykh, while we're talking about sins, I mean, it says the month of Ramadan, your sins will be forgiven if you fast for 30 days. So does that apply to minor sins or does that apply to every sins or is it Allah alam, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows?
I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy is so intensified in the month of Ramadan that we certainly believe even the kaba'ir are forgiven. I mean, just like I feel Ramadan is one of those pillars like the Hajj. It's the mercy of God is such intense that even if you just turn a wee bit, I mean, Allah is ready to almost to forgive everything. Of course, that's what's between us and Allah, not between, you know, me and you, for instance. We still seek out forgiveness. But absolutely, the major and the minor sins are actually forgiven. So especially on the nights of Laylatul Qadr, those things have to really be observed. And, you know, we up to try to spend the Taraweeh in the mosque. And it doesn't have to be the 100 nafils, and you know, some people.
It doesn't have to be all night.
I don't believe that.
Even
just a
small
portion.
act of worship, reading some Quran, with that intention that it's Laylatul Qadr,
and just fervently doing dua, and even sleeping. Sleeping is a form of ibadah. It's interesting. There's a hadith narrated that the shaitan becomes agitated when the fasik goes to sleep. It's like, when is he going to wake up and sin? Because the sleep is almost a reason that has moved you away from sin.
Yeah.
So even the nights of Laylatul Qadr, the sleep that we get is actually an act of ibadah with the intention of get, and then some extra stuff like the Tahajjud and Awabin, those nawafil that we
and Shaykh, obviously there's acts of ibadah very clear. You know, reading Quran, giving away money to charities, as much prayers, Taraweehs. But one of the acts within, I mean, this is a month of forgiveness and mercy. And we seek forgiveness and mercy, praying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant us that. But quite often we ourselves are not willing to forgive and have mercy with others. I mean, you hear of countless families that have family feuds where they don't speak for years, forget Ramadan, for years and years, and it goes to generations. I mean, surely that act of mercy and, you know, making up ties, that's a great reward, a great act of worship, or a huge blessing or reward, especially when it's been done in Ramadan.
Yes. I mean, in Arabic, we call it Silatul Rahim, the idea of maintaining ties. And the hadith were very strong, actually, about cutting ties and the importance of maintaining that. And I think in Ramadan, when we're so in need of Allah's mercy, I think the heart must soften. You know,
but it doesn't.
It doesn't. I think
it doesn't with human beings.
There's an issue. There's a huge issue of ego. I mean, even my own personal datings, I do. Parents have an ego towards their own children. Like, there's things that Deen will
explain, Sheikh. Explain, because I'm a father, you're a father, and you know, we as parents, and I think certainly as kids, we didn't understand that, and maybe the young don't understand. As parents, we're still learning. We're learning how to parent, so we will make mistakes. So
Yeah, I agree. And so I think our ego comes into our play even with our own children, I think, honestly. I mean, I could give some examples that probably, but the idea, the expectancy that we have from children, but when the deen is so easy and it accommodates, but we're not willing to look at that actually, we're still very kind of harsh on them. And then that by large extends to brothers who haven't spoken for a while over money issues. And, I mean, these things are difficult to forgive. I mean, if your brother, you put a flat on your brother's name and then he did you over and sold that and took the money away, how do you forgive that? It's very, very difficult. But you need to find that strength inside you, because I think forgiveness is also letting go. And you're also benefiting yourself actually mentally. And this is the reason maghfirah is so beautiful in Islam. And there's a lot of research done now academically about thankfulness and gratitude and the well-being of it. But the idea was you're letting go of something and you're leaving it between that person and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And almost Allah, once you do that, Allah eases that kind of pain, and He almost makes you kind of forget that. Otherwise, you're day and night, you're in that kind of circle thinking about that.
I totally agree. I mean, Sheikh, I know that when I'm angry at someone, it's always on your mind. But the minute you forgive them, it's a weight off your shoulder, even though whether you might be right or wrong or whatever. But the point is, when you make that first gesture or you make that gesture of forgiveness, it's actually you who benefit as opposed to the person who may have wronged you. And that mental well-being really does come into it.
Yeah.
So this Ramadan, I mean, obviously we're abstaining from certain things and we're trying to do certain acts of worship. But going back to my earlier question, coupled in with that should be this sense of, forgiveness and making up ties. And
I think that really needs to be stressed on, like khutbahs. I mean, because we hear, mashallah, a lot of great things from the imams and scholars, but in Ramadan, almost we don't really talk about relationships. It's about Quran and fasting. And I mean, the second Ashara is the Ashara Maghfirah, forgiveness, the forgiveness between you and God, but it's forgiveness between you and family ties. So, I think actually Ramadan is important actually for that. And another hadith about the shaitan, when he calls his minions and says, what did you guys get up to? And they say, we did this, we did that. And one guy says, well, I caused a husband and wife to split. He goes, yes, you did very well. So the detachment actually and the breakdown of relationships, the shaitan becomes very happy. Not because religiously, but the societal impact and the community impact of the actual that has. But also, I think, and you need probably a different podcast, but also I think our relationship should be very balanced with our siblings and people. I think we become so emotionally invested and then something happens and we retreat. So I think there has to be a balance in that. I mean, as brothers, when it comes to money, things have to be written down. We can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean,
but stuff like that has to be really important.
Totally. I mean, I know with my father, alhamdulillah, he was a businessman, and whenever he would give me money to go out and get some stock, he would stand there and say, can you count it in front of me? And when I would go back and give him money, he'd say, stand here and let me count that in front of you. And he said, it's not about trust, it's about someone can make a mistake. And when if there is a disagreement or a difference here, then people often think maybe they may have dropped it or whatever. So it's not about trust, it's about making sure that, the elements of doubt are eliminated.
And he's teaching you an important lesson by that. Like, if you're my son and I'm doing that with you, you should be doing that with your own children and siblings and family. So it's very important. One little thing on this is one of the cases I'm dealing with. It was a single mother and her daughter and the issues that have arisen. But the mother feels that I literally own my daughter because
most parents feel that way. As
a single mother, I sacrificed everything, and I understand that. But there has to be boundaries in the relationship. It
has to be.
You need to allow them to make mistakes so they kind of learn and experience. So I find these things very interesting.
But that I mean, inshallah, we will do a show on that. But that's a huge topic where, parents, and we're all guilty of that. Sometimes we feel that, our kids owe us more than, more than what's reasonable sometimes. But Sheikh, I mean, this is the month of mercy. It's also a month where Muslims are very generous in terms of giving donations, zakat. And again, coming back to the feud, quite often people fall out over money. And I guess a good way to deal with that is to imagine that you're giving that money away as sadaqah. If you're never going to get it back, but it's kind of, I mean, is that a valid kind of opinion to have? That if someone's not giving you the money, treat it like it's
absolutely. And when you're calculating zakat, in fact, when you're calculating your debts, the scholars say that if someone owes you money, you would really count that as part of your own money and then calculate zakat. But if there's money that you probably think you're never going to
get back,
you just don't account it in your zakat, really. So I suppose that's the best. And you know, I'm sitting here saying it's easy, but you know, when it comes to hundreds of thousands of pounds, I mean, that is a lot of money.
But quite often, I mean, it can come to lots of money, but sometimes it can come to amounts that really is a relationship worth breaking due to that amount. It could be a few thousands or tens of thousands, and also you've got to bear in mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all just and merciful. And if someone does you in this world, you'll get the reward in the next world.
And the niyyah of sadaqah is interesting. I mean, my own example, I set up direct debits with a few, not charities, but a lot of kind of organizations that I feel are very important, you know, kind of media stuff and Islamophobia, those charities. I donate a couple of pounds. And I've realized over the months, those direct debits are increasing. I'm thinking, you know, so last week I logged on to my HMRC account and had like £1,500 left over from my previous tax year. I was like, subhanallah. So, you know, really those things that you spend and you think, oh my God. And I have found that as a reminder for me from Allah that, you know, don't worry, you carry on giving. There are avenues that, you know, that money is going to multiply and come back to you.
Sheikh, I'm going to move on to Taraweeh. Taraweeh is a very important aspect within Ramadan. So tell us, I mean, you hear many things, different opinions, whether you should be reading 8, 11, 20. Obviously there's a Sharia position. And then what was the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What did he read?
I mean,
is it obligatory? Is it something that you must do? Or
I mean, in a very quick nutshell, there's a lot of literature written on that. Sayyidah Aisha narrates that the Prophet ﷺ came out the first night and he prayed, then the second night he prayed, and then the third he never came. And when it was told, he said that I feared that this prayer would have been made fard upon you. So in its nature, it is nafil and it's sunnah, and actually to do that. The hadith about 8 is quite interesting. There is a certain basis actually to that. In certain narrations that the Prophet ﷺ paid 8. But by and large, we follow the sunnah of Sayyidina Umar and the time of the Sahaba, in which 20 was institutionalized. And this was the ijma and the agreement actually of the scholars traditionally. The Maliki scholars took it up to 36, based on the amal of the Ahl al-Madinah. And for the Hanafis, there was sunnah mu'akkada, something which was stressed. I mean, this is the kind of basis of it. Personally, I say to people that even if you can read 8, and I know that there might be a slight backlash, but even if you can read 8, 10, 12, even 4, that is good. I mean, if it's 20, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But I am aware of people working early hours, students, just the commitments and everything. And sometimes we're just not accustomed. I mean, let's bring this idea, because I spent a lot of years in the Islamic world. You want to go to Taraweeh. I mean, I'll share my experience of an Al-Azhar Mosque. An Azhar Mosque, Taraweeh was very long. And every 4 rakahs, they would change the imam and change the riwayah they were reading in Hafs and Warsh, different ways of reading the Quran. And those 20 Taraweeh, by the time you finished, it was just like a spiritual kind of theme park. Basically, you went, every 4 was a different ride, and then you would stop, have some
different
tea.
Sense of excitement.
Yeah, you were sitting in a mosque that was work.
So you would have tea in between.
Yeah, in between. So the tarweeha, which was a gap, when in some mosques they read dua, So there was a break of after every 4. So they would have tea and there was a bit of chit chat for 5 minutes before you would actually start. And I quite enjoyed that because, it was accommodating. And then there was Malaysians and people from different parts of the world that were sitting with you. So can you imagine then at the time of Sayyidina Umar in Medina, senior Sahaba, thousands of people, different Taraweeh recitations. I mean, the whole city came to light in the night. In fact, staying in your home, you felt almost like a munafiq. Like, everyone's out there from the senior Sahaba to everyone. And I'm sitting like a whatever in my room, just, wasting time. It was very unorthodox and very alien to that community. But we're talking in UK, which is, it's very different. So I know scholars are very strict at 20 and establishing the fact is very important. But I find that there has to be a leeway.
And do we know what the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was? Did he read 20? Did he read?
Again, there's different narrations. I mean, the Darul Ifta al Misriya, the Egyptian Fatwa Council, has a really good article overlining this kind of entire case of Taraweeh, and they would say it was anywhere between 8 and 20, depending on standard narrations, but the weaker narrations out of that. And then the Prophet never praying every single night. But it was really institutionalized as a practice by the Sahaba. So in its form, we say as Umariya, Sayyidina Umar really institutionalized it, where he saw people praying in their houses, and he said, no, we need to bring that kind of ummah together.
As a community.
As a community. And he had senior Sahaba leading the entire Quran in Taraweeh.
And as you said, it was institutionalized and became part of Sharia.
Very much.
It's 20. But the fact is, whether someone pays 8 or whatever they can do, they're not breaking any kind of, they're not being sinful. They're allowed to do it because there are different opinions. But it's interesting because the whole thing about Taraweeh, certainly I know many people that don't go to Taraweeh because they do have these commitments at work, or they get a bit older. And because of the duration of Taraweeh as well, it can make it difficult for certain people. It's interesting because when I was recently in Istanbul, first time I've traveled in Ramadan outside the UK, and I just wanted to have a very spiritual Ramadan, and I went to Istanbul, and it was amazing. Went to all the great mosques, the Ahmad Sultan Mosque, the Hagia Sophia. But what was really interesting there is when they were reading the Taraweehs, which were 20, they were doing short surahs, like Qul Huwallahu Ahad, and then straight into Ruku. And, I found it really kind of strange because obviously coming from a Pakistani, India, South Asian background, and most mosques here have these 20 where they read the entire juz. Is there any stipulation in terms of what should be read or the length that should be read?
I mean, again, it goes back to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and when which he appointed imams and to read the kind of entire and do the khatam of the Quran. I personally feel, I think there should be, I think each mosque should accommodate different things. It doesn't mean every mosque should do the khatam. There should be certain mosques that accommodate to shorter. Certainly my own experience in Egypt was certainly like that. I mean, the larger mosques accommodated from the khatam, but the more smaller mosque, it was actually more rapid. And then living in the UK, I suppose people can do Taraweeh in the house. Not every day, but certain days with the wife and kids, I think is a lovely sunnah.
So you can do it in the house. It doesn't necessarily have to be
do it in the house and have the family together, and do the Qul Huwallahu 20 times and bang it through and do it in half an hour. I think is important. But
I must say that the shorter surahs, there's a magic about hearing the recitation, but the shorter surahs were very mashallah, invigorating as well, because
and I suppose you know them, so you're almost reading along with the imam, and people know translations of
because and we're going to be really controversial here, and we'll probably get some backlash. Is obviously when you go into a masjid and the full juz is being read, because we're from a Indian, Pakistani, South Asian background, many of us don't understand the meaning. And what happens is your mind starts to wander. You start thinking about what you did during the day, what you've got. Is that really the whole essence of reading Taraweeh? Surely the essence is, it's different for the Sahabas or those that came before, especially around the Arabian Peninsula, because they could understand that. But for those that don't speak Arabic, how do you deal with that sort of drifting of your mind?
I mean, that is true, but I suppose a counter argument would be you should be a bit more invested than in learning some Arabic, or going over through a translation at least, or going over the translation of the juz. But no, I do understand that. I think the mind really does wander.
You should do, but the reality is
with
people's lives and not everyone gets that. And I think my own gut feeling is you'll be lucky if 5% of people in the community will get to understand and reason. Alhamdulillah, I'm blessed that I've had people like yourself teaching me syllabus and having studied Arabic for a year. But even then, it can be quite challenging.
But you can, I suppose, now you've done Arabic, you can also, certain words that the Hafiz is reading, you
can pick up certain things. But for the vast
majority
of it, how do you then train your mind not to drift?
There's this, I couldn't find the quote on this, but I remember reading this somewhere of Hazrat Umar, in which when he used to pray Nawafil, his mind used to go to, well, my next battle is coming, how am I going to station the soldiers? And there's a remark about...
As opposed to ourselves, where we think about, where's my next cash and carry going to be?
Yeah, and the quote goes something, even then, he didn't feel bad about that. He said even that was a positive thing. I tried to go back and find that quote. I just couldn't. I was reading a commentary on Sahih Muslim, in fact. So I would say the mind can wander, just doesn't wander too much. But I mean, Allah's mercy is intense in that we're still getting rewarded for listening actually to that. And I mean, if you can make your mind wander to Makkah, Medina, or Istanbul, actually, you know.
And how important, I mean, I've mentioned about me going to Istanbul, and we were having a chat previously about the importance of being in that environment, especially during Ramadan. Many people go to Umrah. It's a very spiritual time. How important it is to be taking yourself away during a Ramadan, whether it's Makkah, Medina, or any kind of Muslim country where it's rich with Islamic history.
I think it is very, very important. I mean, if people have money, and it's not expensive to travel these days, but to experience a Ramadan with the family in a Muslim country, I think it is really important. You just understand how it's done and you feel how it's done. I mean, I was in Egypt for a very long time, and coming back, I mean, the only thing with Egypt is that you missed family in Ramadan.
Yeah.
But you would have that sense. I mean, everything around you changes. The restaurants no longer open up in the morning, so even if you didn't want to fast, there's not much places you can eat. Every shop you go to, the Quran is actually being played. The mosques are full for the 5 salahs. Egypt had a big thing with the live qaris actually in every mosque praying in the morning. And then iftar time, just the buzz of everyone outside to doing iftari outside. The streets are decorated. There's something visual. You sit in the taxi guy's got Quran on.
Yeah.
Everything around you changes. I was in Tunisia a couple of months ago, and
I guess the analogy is at Christmas here in the UK. Everything is focused around Christmas. But when you're in a Muslim country,
everything
Ramadan,
is focused around Ramadan. I was in Tunisia a couple of months, and I thought to myself, I was at Zaytuna, the beautiful masjid there, and I thought, I'm going to come back here just for 2-3 days, just to spend Ramadan with the kids. You can even go to Morocco. Morocco is very cheap. Just 3 days. You don't have to do much. Just go Taraweeh in the night.
I did 3 days, and it was
and it really it's changed. It really changes perspective.
Shaykh, one of the things that sort of got me when I was reading Taraweehs there and doing my prayers there, and that's the other thing. You go out your way to make sure that you're reading every prayer in Jamaat in a mosque. And what really got me when I was in Ahmad Sultan or Hagia Sophia is, you know, some of these mosques were 600-700 years old, and the spot I was praying in, I'm thinking, how many people would have prayed in that spot? How many great scholars? How many great alims? You know, and that's a mind-blowing sort of thought.
So I'll tell you a wee story on that. The Sultan Bayezid Mosque in Istanbul, because the last time when I went, I told Shaykh Hassan, we prayed Jummah in Sultan Bayezid. So the Ottoman sultans, a lot of their money was from wars and dubious places. But Sultan Bayezid, when he built his mosque, he said, I'm going to build it with pure 100% wealth. So when the ulama found out, that was always a favorite place for the ulama to go to read at Sultan Bayezid. So when I went there to pray Jummah, and I went with a couple of guys, Shaykh Hassan there, you're standing there thinking, the thousands of scholars and awliya came, prayed, and you know, it's a very overwhelming experience.
It is, and obviously being there, the blessed month of Ramadan, the magic of Ramadan, and then you're in these amazing places where, you know, you can feel the energy there.
And and there's an investment. So you know, the muaddin are paid. I mean, they're not like your local uncle, you know, doing the adhan. He is trained in the maqamat. He is paid by the government. Then there's the imam. And then there's the people who do the tasbihat after namaz. They're incredibly trained. So, you know, it's almost like an orchestra of different people coming together and having their input. And it's very beautiful. It sounds great. And you're really mesmerized actually by it all.
No, it's amazing. So really recommend it for anyone who's going to go there. Sheikh, you talked about Itikaaf. We touched on that. What's the concept behind Itikaaf? I mean, what's the purpose? What are the conditions, and who should be doing it?
Itikaaf in its very basic form really means seclusion, I think. And I think it's ever more important for us to experience Itikaaf, because you're so plugged into reality and everything, just to step away from that. I mean, and we know the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ sat Itikaaf every month of Ramadan. The last month he increased that, and in which he would review the Quran with Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam. We don't have 10-day luxury again. We're working people, sadly. And so I would, again, even if it's a weekend, if it's 2-3 days in the local mosque, I know people go, a lot of people from the UK go to Masjid al-Aqsa for Itikaaf, but even people went for the last 2-3 days to do that. But just to feel the detachment again, Ramadan is here to disrupt our normal routine.
Right.
You know, that normal routine we've fallen into in the evening, have khana, watch something on Netflix, and then have tea, and then check your social media, then go to sleep. It's such
your
a
life
rut.
is prescribed for you.
Yeah, such a rut. And Ramadan is to disrupt everything. Sadly, for many of us, it doesn't make that disruption. Those habits somehow still seep through. Then Itikaaf is another injection, right? This is a disruption. So when you move away from your own comfort of your own house, your bed, your favorite spot on where you can see the TV properly, you know, all of that, and you're into the mosque with other beautiful souls, and you're in that, you've been moved away, plucked away from that. I think that's really important. So very, very important.
In terms of
experience that.
Fully appreciate that and get that, but when you're doing Itikaaf, I mean, is there any conditions? I mean, I know people that were spending night in the masjid, and then they were going out to do their regular job and then come back at night. I mean, is there any hard and fast rules?
I think that's lovely. No, the actual Sunnah Itikaaf has hard rules to it. You cannot step outside the mosque. Okay. It has to be minimal talking. I mean, there's an ikhtilaf over the gadgets. Are you allowed a phone or you're not? I mean, that's kind of a grey area.
Well, if you're doing Itikaaf and you're spending your time watching TikTok videos,
I mean, it's probably.
But then I can
argue, you're watching halal TikToks. I mean, I did Itikaaf 10 years ago with about 12 young people in Ziyal Quran. It was very structured. We would do Taraweeh. After Taraweeh, we would chill out. We'd have tea. Then I would get each person to do tahajjud. We would practice tahajjud. We would learn one ayah of Surah Mulk every day. We would sit together for half an hour. But we did watch Islamic documentaries every day. It was really structured. And you can do that, actually. A lot of scholars are actually doing that. And it was amazing. I mean, these guys still message me and say, Sheikh, when are you doing the next Itikaaf? I'm like,
yeah, I mean,
But that's a structured, proper 10 days cut off from the world Itikaaf.
I mean, that's good because not only are you having that time for reflection and that solitude, but you're using that time to educate. And we know education is a huge, important factor within Islam, and especially in Ramadan, you have to constantly be teaching yourself the sacred knowledge.
For me, it was a bit. So I would advise people that if you want to do the fast Itikaaf, which is in the evening in the mosque or the weekend, that's fine. But if you want a 10-day Itikaaf, either go out abroad. If not, there's a lot of amazing mosques in the UK with amazing sheikhs who have structured 10 days. And I would really, very much recommend that. I mean, local mosque, and I know some mu'takifs, they're just going to sleep during the day and wake up for Ramadan and all of that.
Because that's what obviously, if you asked me about Taraweeh, Itikaaf when I was younger, that was the impression you would have, that people would go to the mosque, sleep there during the day.
That's not.
But it has to be a bit more.
The Itikaaf, there was a rigorous program, and there was something, and there was an intent behind that. We used to sit down, do a group reading of 2-3 juz a day rather than everyone individually. So it's because in collective, things are much easier done than you're alone. And you're alone, even reading feuds namaz is and in collective, you can read 20-30 Taraweeh, and you can, so Laylatul Qadr, you read Salatul Tasbih and all of that.
So Itikaaf, for men, it's recommended they go to the mosque.
Yeah.
What about women?
For women, there was a position in the Shafi'i madhab that women can also go to a mosque where there's a designated space for women, but generally the Hanafis recommended it for women. They do it in their own house. There was a time, the Al-Quran has a flat upstairs, but there was a time where certain sisters sat Itikaaf upstairs. Again, it was very enjoyable for them, because in your house, women are alone, but here, you had a few women and you sat together as an experience. But the Shafi madhab has that position.
And in terms of the Hanafi position, women can do it at home.
How
does that kind of manifest itself? I mean, you're not allowed to leave the house, or
you're not. You designate a space, a room, and you would spend most of the time there with very minimal contact.
But you can still go to other parts of the room.
No, well, it would just be to the basic bathroom and really back. It's very kind of, even when you're minimal talk, and so you'd have to observe that. But women folk, men folk suffer when women folk say Itikaaf. You need to mentally prepare.
And men need to learn how to cook as well. That's the other thing. But alhamdulillah, look, this is the good thing. During this blessed month, there are many, many opportunities to gain the rewards. So we're here in the last couple of minutes. Shaykh, I would like you to just summarize. I mean, we talked about some of the things. What's your final thoughts? What would you like to leave with, given what we talked about today?
Yeah, I think Ramadan is a joyous month. And I know sometimes we'd be very grumpy with the fasting and Taraweeh and all of that. I think we just need to have a change in our mentality. Like, we should begin to enjoy these things and savor them. They're not going to be here for much long, and then they're going to be gone. We're going to go back to our normal routine. There has to be this general excitement in the house, within the family. And I think as men, part of the household, we need to kind of generate that some sort of excitement within the kids, doing stuff together with them, putting banners up. There has to be. I like your point about Christmas, because Christmas really transforms people's houses, makes people Christmas trees and all that. I'm not saying that in Ramadan do that, but our houses, there has to be this kind of change.
Is there anything wrong with having a little balancing?
No, absolutely, it's great. I mean, if you go to the Muslim countries, you see the change in shops and houses, and people are really kind of really changing.
This idea of making it more exciting for children, because children are children. They've got Christmas to compare with, so we have to make it a bit more exciting.
Visually, things have to change. I mean, in my own house, we don't have a TV, but we have a kind of screen with a computer. But I have the live Quran Kareem channel, Qanatul Quran Al Kareem, playing 24 hours. So those we have the bakhur burning more often, that kind of smell. Things have to and kind of excitement, So we need to bring that. I think we have less of that. It's more like grumpy. Oh, Taraweeh, that I think that's really changed. And part of that could be by traveling a few days to an Islamic country with the family. I think that's really important. That ties in. I mean, I don't know how Dubai is. I can imagine. Does Dubai change in Ramadan? I don't know.
I'm sure it does, but it's probably a lot more expensive.
But Istanbul, Tunisia, Cairo, Jerusalem. I mean, these traditional cities with traditional mosques. Yeah, they have a big impact.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Thank you very much. Our next podcast will be on Laylatul Qadr. We'll go into it in a bit more detail. So take advantage of the next 10 days and inshallah make dua for us as well. Assalamu alaikum.